using it as a crutch, I guess. How are you evaluating that this spring from that group? And I guess especially how is this defense giving you a better indication of that just by how tight their coverage is, how much pressure they can bring?
Yeah, I think that's the thing here right now is, you feel like if you can stop, the running game, you feel like you're doing a pretty good job. If you feel like, you can pass on our DBs, you're doing a pretty good job. If you feel like you can cover some of our receivers, you're doing a good job. So this is back and forth on a daily basis, and it's great competition, individually going against really good players, but also against a great unit on defense and a great unit on offense. But, there are ways, like in particular today, we were doing some open side reading of the defensive end. And if the defense decides they're going to crash it and make the quarterback run the ball, then that's their decision. Now, we also know that if that's going on too much, we know ways to handle that, whether it's bringing a tight end over to block them, to make sure the running backs are getting enough carries. So it just depends on the design of the play. And today that's what happened. But, we have ways to adjust that based on if we're going to a game plan.
Over here, Tim May, the Tim May podcast.
Just two quickies. Ryan, number one, is it now tradition that a Griffin will score the last touchdown in the spring?
I guess so. That was pretty wild.
But number two, you talked about a second ago. I think the depth maybe at cornerback is a little bit overlooked. Calvin Simpson-Hunt, for example, stepped up today. What have you seen of him in particular this spring? Because he was highly rated coming in, and et cetera.
Good player. Like you said, highly rated, but good player. He's growing every day. He came in the summer, so this is his first full spring. And, for Lincoln and for and for Jason Moore and, I think Cade McDonald, those guys all came in the summer. So this is their first full year. They still haven't been on campus for a year. You think that they've been around for a long time, but they haven't. So now you're starting to see him get comfortable with the calls. And we've said this before, we have got to play depth, and you're good to see Jermaine good in there, and a little bit of nickel. Obviously, Jordan's going to be the starting nickel in there, but he can jump out to corner. So that gives us some flexibility. And then seeing Calvin out there as well. And the other guy who really had a good spring until, we had to have a little procedure done just out of caution was Lorenzo Styles. So to your point, I think that there is good depth there, but we're going to need them all.
Is this as good a depth as you've seen defensively in a few years? I mean, from your vantage point.
At corner, yes. I think we're still, for me to say that the best we've seen at all positions. No, I don't think we're there. Yeah. But at corner and, maybe at a couple other positions, and then some other positions we got to solidify a little better.
Okay. Final question for Coach Day, Spencer Holbrook, Letterman Row.
Ryan, you've talked a lot about needing guys for 16, 17 games in depth, but one of the positions that we haven't really talked about that with is receiver. Like, do you feel like you guys have the receiver depth that you need right now? And can those guys, those top 4 or 5, play all 16, or do you need guys, younger guys, or veterans who haven't really contributed to step up?
Yeah, I think it's a legitimate question. I think when you have Mecca and Carnell, and then Jaden Ballard, Jeremiah, and then you get into, Bryson Rogers, who has done some really good things this spring. I know he had a couple of tough plays today, but we think he can really help us next year. We're missing Brandon Ennis. Brandon Ennis, same thing. He was having, a lot of momentum, and then there was a procedure. We just felt like out of caution, we had to get it done. We just didn't want it to linger, so we did that. So we'll need him to step up in a big way. And then, to your point, we're going to need a couple more guys to step up to build that depth there, because we do have some really good players, but we're going to need them all. So I think it's important that some of those younger guys do step up. We are going to get, Milan this summer, and we're going to get, Demarion Witten, who's going to play, a little bit of receiver, a little bit of tight end. So we do have some young guys, and to your point, they're going to have to help us.
Do you think that Jaden is in that group right now that can help you?
I think Jaden took a step here this last week. We've been challenging him. There's been a couple plays, one in particular, he needed to make some plays to say, okay, I'm here and you can count on me. There was a really contested play in the red zone that he made. He made a big play on a post out here the other day. So you're starting to see him make those plays. And if he can do that for us with his, deep speed down the field, he can really stretch the defense. And so we're going to need him to. And we did see things in the last couple of weeks that led us to believe that he can.
I'm sorry, Coach. I got one more. Joey Kaufman, Columbus Dispatch, and then we've got Coach Knowles.
Ryan, as you look back on not just today, but all 15 practices and assess the impact that Chip's had for you guys, is there something you feel like, or just in general, where he's helped maybe the most, where his presence the last 2 months has given you guys the biggest boost?
Yeah, I think he brings one voice to the defense, and I think that's very, very important. Certainly, has an unbelievable history of running the football, and I think when you start to tie in some of those quarterback runs, and you notice those quarterback runs aren't designed quarterback runs really. Most of them are reading an end, and those aren't hellacious hits. They're things where we're going to keep guys upright, and he does a really good job of that. But the other thing too with Chip was, he got here just a couple weeks before spring started. So, we kind of got the spring going, pushed through the spring, learned about the personnel. I think the next couple of months will be important to figure out where we go now. What do we do? What does the install look in the preseason? And then we go from there. So like any spring, you want to identify the personnel and get guys better, and then really dive into the scheme and the chemistry as we head into the summer.
Coach, thank
Do
you.
you feel like you're compelled to let the quarterbacks know where they stand before Tuesday?
We're going to give them feedback for sure, and go from there. But yeah, I think we, after you go through 15 practices, you want to give feedback.
Great. Coach, thank you very much.
Right, you said Brandon's injury is not long-term.
Coach, thank you. Yep. All right, folks, we're going to bring Coach Jim Knowles up here, and then after that, we'll have Chip Kelly. We will open up the floor for Coach Knowles. Over here to the right, Dylan Davis, Delaware Gazette.
Hey, Jim. Tywan Malone is a guy who really flashed out there today. I'm just curious, where does Tywan fit in your depth defensive line right now? It's a guy who probably doesn't get talked about as much, but where does he fit in that right now? What have you seen from him in the spring?
He's developed for sure. Wasn't quite ready last year for a lot of reps, but he's shown marked improvement. So, long season, we play a lot of guys up front. We really need him to come along, and he showed flashes of that.
Over to the left, Nathan Baird, Cleveland.com.
With guys like Lathan and Malik, and I guess Lorenzo also not being able to play, and that's been, I guess, the case through most of spring. Just what did that open up for you as far as developing more depth at safety, and how have you seen guys like Bonsu and McLean assert themselves this spring?
Yeah, every situation like that gives somebody an opportunity. Our depth was really down at safety this spring. So, because you had Lathan, you had Jihad, you had Malik, and then Lorenzo. So it opened up opportunities, and Bonsu is a guy who really got a lot of reps, and you saw him improve. And then McLean, I think, is a great plus. He is a guy that has football intelligence. He's picked it up. He's kind of those incoming freshmen who still should be in high school. He's a guy I think you're going to point to, and you can see right now he's going to be a player.
Over to the right, Austin Ward, the podcast.
What is a healthy Mitchell Melton? How does he fit in for your defense? What does he bring to it?
Yeah, Mitch is that combination player, in our 4 down, he's a guy that can do a lot of things, drop, fold in there, make plays. You see some of that all the time. Really athletic. We're kind of loaded at that end position, so he's going to play there. But, like I said last year, we haven't needed it, but he's a guy you would point to along with C.J. Hicks, for the long season. People get injured. You get a little light inside. It's always hard on the defensive tackles. But if you're going to play with 3 ends, that Mitch is a guy who definitely can do all that. He has that.
Over to the left, Joey Kaufman, Columbus Dispatch.
Jim, you've talked about this before, but I think in past years where you're going up against a really talented receiver group offense to encourage your players it's not okay if they give up the play and to go nearly almost the first half. Today where the offense didn't get in the end zone until late in the second half, and you guys have guys down in the secondary. Just what did you think of that sort of trend and how it's evolved and the way you guys almost shut them out the first half?
Yeah, I think it's become, an expectation now. Our DBs, our BIA, best in America, we led the country in pass defense, right? I think it was 96 when I got here, and it was number 1 last year. So they've taken that spirit. So it's a competitive spirit. It's an expectation now. It doesn't matter who we're going against. They view it as a standard. So that was good to see in the first half.
Over to the right, Spencer Holbrook, Letterman Row.
Jim, we've talked about safety changing the way that you play defense and the Leo and the linebackers, but how much does having the depth that you guys have at defensive tackle change the way that you can do things defensively?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to play to your strengths, and that's my job is to what do we have and what do we do best. And when you have defensive tackles, and I've said it before, it helped our defense so much last year. When you have defensive tackles that actually make tackles, which is what we have right now, it changes the way you call a game. It certainly helps you be in better shape on explosive plays on the back end. You don't have to do a whole lot to help those guys out because they're making tackles. So you got to go with that. You got to let those guys play and they're good. So you can't get too far away from the scheme of having those defensive tackles make plays because they're doing it and it works.
Over to the left, Tony Girdman, Buckeye Huddle.
Jim Ryan talked about the quarterback run being more of a thing with the offense this year. During the season, how much of when you're facing a team like that, how much does that impact your day-to-day throughout the week preparing for that?
Yeah, it's a ton. I think it changes everything you do on defense. You see it everywhere from the NFL on down. If you have a quarterback who can make plays with his feet, your scheme better be designed that, to take that away and to account for it. So it changes the way you look at everything when you're game planning.
Thank you, Donovan. Over here to the right, Tim May, the Tim May podcast.
Yeah, Jim, you might be interrupted when I asked Ryan about just, for example, Calvin Simpson-Hunt, but the corners seem to be playing almost with a chip on their shoulder to a certain extent. I mean, Davis and Nick Benosin took today personally, it looked like, you know what I mean, because some of the hype going into the game. But what do you see from that group in particular that buoys you going into this offseason?
Yeah, when you have corners that you can count on, again, it's just like having defensive tackles in the run game. When you have corners you can count on that are going to compete all the time, no matter what the situation is, and we've developed that. Again, it changes the way you call the entire game. I mean, you're able to leave those guys on an island. You're able to switch up coverages, and they know what they're doing, and they take great pride in it. So having those guys out there in the development, it's a big deal. It really is.
And his Hunt jumped into the picture a little bit more. I mean, obviously came in late last year.
Yeah, I mean, he did come in late, and he's one of those guys that just competes every day, doesn't say much. He's trying to live up to the standard of the other guys, and you see him coming along. You see him step by step coming along, and put him in a competitive atmosphere, see him step up. That's a great sign.
And final question for Coach Knowles, Dan Hope, 11 Warriors.
You mentioned CJ Hicks a few minutes ago. Have you seen him take the strides you need to see this spring to trust him as a guy who could be a potential starter on this defense?
Yes. I mean, I think CJ has shown that he has talent, and I think it's my job to put him in the best situations for him because he can be a force. He's much better when he's blitzing or he's directed because he's able to use his athletic ability. But he has certainly shown that he's going to be able to help this defense.
Coach, thank you very much for your time. All right, and we will bring offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach Chip Kelly to the podium now. We'll open up the questions. Over to the left, Bill Rabinowitz, Columbus Dispatch.
Hey, Chip. What are your just general impressions of the offense coming out of spring, especially at quarterback?
We'll look at all 15. So I think, this day is a big part of it, because it was the first time they ever got to play. Some of those guys ever got to play in front of a crowd. And it was an amazing crowd. You get 80,000 for a spring game. You could see some of the young guys kind of looking around like, wow, this is different than the indoor. But that's what they have to get ready to play in. So we got better from practice 1 to practice 15. It's still an evaluation through the whole process, but it's not something, and the players know too, that we're not making a decision walking off the field today saying, hey, this is the direction that we're going in. We'll be very authentic and look through everything and make sure that we get a really good feel for what it all looks like, and then who will best move this offense. That's what our decision is going to be based on.
quarterback situation right now?
I do. I think we got a lot of guys there. That part's tough. I think because there's guys that deserve reps, and they're all competing for it. So, sometimes you'd like to be. Sometimes when you had a guy who was an initial starter, well, he's going to get the bulk of the reps to get him better. But they capitalized on it, and we really rolled them. If you were at some of our spring practices, you're watching all those guys rotate in, rotate out. And as we talk about all the time, the old adage is don't count your reps, make your reps count. And we'll put it all together and really come up with, which guy do we really feel is going to help us move this offensively.
Over to the far right, Bill Landis, the podcast, Kings of the North.
Hey, Chip. You said when we first talked to you that the basis of a lot of your success running the football is just kind of figuring out what your guys do best and then leading into that. Over 15 practices now, how good of a feel do you think you have for that? And then what do the next few months look like as you try to piece that all together?
Really good question. It's interesting because the one thing that I think sometimes makes it tough in an evaluation is what a good front we went against. So for 15 practices, those guys on the other side of the ball were a pain, Jack and JT and Tyleek and those guys. But I know come fall, there's not going to be anybody more happy that we have those guys on the defensive side of the ball because of what they can do. So I still think we'll have to really evaluate that, what we're good at, what we're not, what we got to get better at, what we got to work on. But I think the work we got against such a quality defense was really key for us.
Over to the far left, Nathan Baird, Cleveland.com.
So a year ago at this time, it came out of the spring with still a lot of question marks about the offensive line. And even, I guess, last season came out with question marks. How have you seen that progress in the time that you've been here? And what's your confidence level that offensive line is going to allow this offense to do everything it wants to do this fall?
Yeah, I've been here a short amount of time, so I really don't have anything to compare it to. So I kind of tabula rasa, come in with a blank slate and just observe it. I think we're really athletic. I think Donnie and Seth and those guys inside are really smart and really intelligent. They allow you to be able to make adjustments in game. Just talking football with some of those guys, it's like, wow, these guys are wired the right way. And a lot of those guys have played a lot of football. So they can bank on their experience there. I think we've got about 4 guys that have played significant amount of snaps, and we got to make sure we can find out who the 5th guy is. But that's similar to where the quarterback spot is, I think. And I also think in the offensive line, you're not going to play a 16, 17 game season and just play with 5 guys. You really have to develop your depth there. There's going to be a number 2 center that's going to play a lot of football. There's going to be a number 2 guard, whether it's on either side of the ball. There's going to be a 3rd tackle. I think you're going to get tested, especially with this new playoff format. You really have to think that way. So, you're not looking for 5 starters. You're really looking for 10 starters because you're going to have to probably play 10 guys when you get through a 16, 17 game season.
Over to the right, Austin Ward, the podcast.
Chip, I think it was the first play of the game, the T formation, and then the reverse, spin move with Will Howard. What's the inspiration for that package and that sort of wrinkle with the quarterback?
Mr. Hayes, he has there's a looming figure around this whole program. We get to go to work every day in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. So it was good enough for Woody. We're going to steal it. We're going to do it. We ran some last year. I think we took 21 snaps at UCLA and T. Been a short yardage formation for us, and we've done some different things with it. But I think our players had a lot of fun, practicing that and doing some different things. So it's a small part of our offense. We will not be in the T 21 times in one game, but we may get it in some short yardage situations. And I think it's come back. There's a lot of schools right now that are starting to do that. It's really just you're trying to. You got a half a yard to get. You're trying to get your big guys in the game. And I think we used 3 tight ends and 2 running backs in our formation today, with Peckard being the fullback in that situation. So there's a lot of different things you can do in short yardage, but a little bit of a tribute to Coach Hayes and what he means to this program.
Joey Kaufman, Columbus Dispatch, over to the left.
Chip, as you look back, now you've been here 2 months, 15 spring practices. Is there something you feel best about what you've been able to accomplish with this offense?
Well, I haven't accomplished anything because I didn't take a snap. But I think the most impressive thing since I've been here is how close this football team is. Some programs talk about a brotherhood. This is really a brotherhood. Our practices, as we talked about how good our defense is, they're highly competitive, but they're not combative. And those guys really work very, very well together, both the O-line and the D-line, the secondary and the receivers. The competition is the best. It's got to be the best there is in the country, and that makes you better. But I think sometimes competition, guys can lash out and it gets really combative, and then all of a sudden the fight breaks out and we're trying to accomplish and get football done. But I think the way these guys cooperate and work together as a group is a special bond, and I think you're going to need the closest team and the most connected teams are the ones that win.
Over to the right here, Andy Backstrom, Letterman Row.
Chip, obviously there's been a lot of talk about Jeremiah, but Emeka is the big returner in this group. He kind of reminded everyone what he can do today. What's it been like working with him, and what kind of weapon can he be for you guys?
Good point. And Emeka has reminded me in the other 14 practice sessions of what he can do. Special player, and JJ's a really talented player also. But, I think all of the whole group, like Carnell Tate did some really good things watching him this spring. And for all of them, I mentioned it with the offensive line. I came in with a blank slate. I had no opinions formed, not that, really just wide-eyed and just observe them. But, I think that wide receiver room is really special. And I think there's a bunch of guys in there. And again, when you have to play multiple games after the regular season is over, you're going to make sure you're going to need depth like that. And the fact that you feel a little bit comfortable right now that we got some guys there that can make some plays on the perimeter. And that really dictates how people are going to defend you, So you got a couple really good running backs, so are they going to load the box? Are you really going to load the box and leave those guys in one-on-one coverage? Well, then it's the quarterback's responsibility to decipher that and get the ball to those guys. So, or do they elicit double coverage? They elicit double coverage, and now it's a little bit lighter box and you can run the ball. So having too many weapons is a good problem to have.
Second row left, Pat Murphy, 24/7 Sports.
Chip, we've talked a lot about kind of the quarterbacks maybe vying for the starting spot, but some of the younger guys, what have you seen from them? We got an opportunity to see more of them today than we probably have. What's your assessment of them as they kind of get into this?
I always am so impressed with young guys that enroll early and watching how they get acclimated in what they do. When you look at Julian and Air and JJ, they should be in the hot lunch line of their high school. And they're out here playing in front of 80,000 people. And they've really progressed when you watch them in meetings and listen to them, and they interpret, so basically the whole concept here is we throw them in the deep end and see if they can swim. We didn't baby anything. We don't put the install in with, hey, you guys are install. We're going to install this with the older players, and then you guys, go sit at the kiddie table, and we're just going to do the really simple things with you. They get it all, and the more they can digest, the more when you're in a room, when you're checking for understanding and asking questions, and they can spit back to you, the more confidence you have when they get in there with the plays that you can call for them. So. Those guys have been impressive. They're still learning. They were the guys today that were kind of looking around and saying, wow, there's like 80,000 people here, along with the offensive coordinator and the quarterback coach, because I was kind of looking around because I had actually never been in the stadium until yesterday when we had our 14th practice in there. So I played Ohio State once when I was at Oregon, but that was in the Rose Bowl, so I had never been actually in the stadium until yesterday. So I caught myself when I went into the stadium today looking around saying 80,000 for a spring game. That's impressive.
Got time for just a few more, folks. Over here to the right, Dylan Davis, Delaware Gazette.
Given what you just said about throwing them into the deep end, what stood out the most to you about Julian's progression through 15 practices and where he is as you guys head out of spring?
Julian is a very fast processor. He really thinks very, very quickly on his feet. Like he makes really quick decisions. He doesn't stick on and reads. He can progress and he sees things really well for a young player, and not having been exposed to a lot of college defenses and especially what Jim does. Jim can make a young freshman quarterback cry with some of the stuff he does. But, I never saw that with Jules, and I that's been impressive, his ability to retain. And, him and JJ, the compliment I would say to him is, if you got here and you didn't know what class they were in, you wouldn't say that those guys were freshmen in terms of how they've picked things up. And sometimes freshmen act like freshmen, but the guys who are special, they don't act like freshmen. They act like they're football players. And those are two guys that are examples of that.
Far left, Cameron Teague Robinson, The Athletic.
Chip, you on the topic of freshmen, James Peoples and Sam got a lot of run in the second half.
Yeah.
You talk about how deep you need to be in this era of college football, but as you search for RB3, what did you see from them today, and what what has their growth been like in this spring?
Yeah, James really flashed early for me, not knowing, again, kind of, let's just don't worry about what the background is, where they're from, who they are. Did this guy have this stars? This guy have that stars? They're all Buckeyes, and just how they do it. I think James has got really good feel and vision. He can hit things. I thought Sam did some really good things today. TC is another guy who really came along during the spring. And we're constantly talking in our staff meetings about depth. We're very cognizant of the fact that the playoff situation has changed. So you have to develop that depth. Used to be maybe have a pair and a spare is what everybody says, but I think you may have to have more than that. You're talking about 16, 17 games. You're really going to be tested that way. So I was really happy with how those young guys have come along here in the 15 training sessions that we've had.
Over here to the right, Tim May, the Tim May podcast.
Thank you, Jerry.
You have your own podcast?
Yeah.
Like these guys all had like a name next to theirs.
Yeah,
Yours
mine's
is your
the Tim
name.
May Show. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
you're
pretty
welcome
cool.
anytime, Chip.
You must have some juice if you got your name in your podcast.
Definitely.
Okay.
By the way,
I like it.
It's not just the lunch line; it's the hot lunch line. That's what I like.
Yeah, it's a hot lunch line.
Yeah. Just two quickies. Number one, do you feel compelled to let these quarterbacks know where they stand? You know what's coming up Tuesday. You know what I mean? Where does that go? I mean, in your mind?
Yeah, we'll sit down as a staff and visit, meet on it, and then Ryan. I mean, he does an unbelievable job of, I think, all our players understand where they fit and what the picture is, and we'll give them our assessment. This isn't, we're not going to come back, but we do it after every day. They know where they stood after practice 1, after 2, after 3, after 4. We grade everything. They're getting constant feedback in terms of where we are, and then after 15, which we had today. But we can't do it unless you watch the film and can really look at the things, because you may see something, but you're on the sideline. Why did he make that decision? Well, I couldn't really see the field safety from where he was. Okay, now I understand why he made that decision. So, but we'll have meetings with all our players, and that's always been the method. So this week during, between Monday through Friday, we're all scheduled. No one's going on the road to recruiting until after that, but we'll all have player meetings at every position. Offensive line, defensive line, linebacker, safeties, everybody's going to sit down with their position coaches and know where they fit and where we see them.
But do you feel a pressure with the transfer portal looming? I mean, you've been a head coach for a long time. I mean, is that on your mind that Tuesday?
Yeah, I think we're all aware of it. I'm 100%, and I don't think it's pressure, but I think you just open lines of communication, and everybody knows, what your evaluation was through the training sessions that we have.
Guys, we got real quick. Last two questions, Dan Hope and then Rob Aller.
Feel like you need to have a starting quarterback named by, and what are the biggest things you're going to be looking for between now and then in determining who that guy's going to be?
Well, between now and whatever then is, we're not allowed as coaches to go back out and practice with them. In college football, you get 15 training sessions in the off season, and then they'll go back to working with Mick in the weight room and getting bigger, getting faster, getting stronger. They'll have organized activities themselves, and they do a really good job of that. But once there's a football out, we're not allowed to be there to evaluate and even assess. So they're really, from a football standpoint, are on their own until August. So you always want to do it earlier. But I also believe every time I've been involved in this is that it kind of happens organically and authentically, because the players know. And if you say, hey, we decided we're going to be with Joe, and they all think it's Tim, they know. They're in the locker room with them every day. Players understand, who they feel is the guy, and most of the time, the decision is very obvious. When you just say, "Hey, this is where we are with it," But there's that timetable thing. I can't give you an exact timetable on that. So,
Rob,
Chip, you talked about Julian, but typically in your experience, you've done it again, like Tim said, a long time. How long does it take for the game to slow down for a young QB?
I think it depends on the individual. I've had some kids where early, you were like, wow. Marcus Mariota was like that. I remember vividly second practice, and he got to the fifth read in the progression and threw it out here, and it was a big game. And I asked him why. I do that all. I asked why because I just want to understand it. And I said, why did you do that? And he goes, I don't know what we call that defense, but there was a lot of guys over there, and it didn't seem like there was anybody over there. But for him to process it that fast, and he was right. And he came back the other day, and that was cover 6 the other day, Coach. I learned what you guys call the coverages, but it all happens differently. I've got guys that for 2 years seem like they're just, they're really struggling, and then the light bulb goes off, and you go, whoa, like they got it. So everybody has different learning styles. Our job in the evaluation process is to identify those learning styles. So, are they a cognitive learner? Are they an auditory learner? Do they learn by feel? Is it more a feel guy, a more film guy? It's all different. And I think we have to keep poking and prodding. And for us as coaches, that's the challenge too, is what is their best learning style and how can we convey it? Because education basically is just a transportation of knowledge. But it really doesn't matter what I know or what Ryan knows. It matters what they know. So that's always kind of what we're working on and studying and thinking about, and kind of where we are and how much can they handle, and then how much is too much, because this may be a great play. I agree 100%. But if he doesn't feel it's a good play, then why is it in? You know what I mean? And that's this whole feeling out process that they're learning us and we're learning them. So
offenses have identities. So do coaches, really.
Mm-hmm.
Running quarterbacks, is that something you've always sort of leaned toward, or is it year by year, case by case? What advantages do you like about? Because all your guys can run a little bit.
Yeah, I think a running quarterback causes problems for a defense. So when plays break down, the unscheduled plays, if you just go back to the recent Super Bowl, on that last drive, the 2 big plays were Mahomes' run. But Patrick Mahomes is not a runner. Andy's not calling design quarterback runs for Pat. But when the defense matches up and plays 2-man and turns their back to the quarterback, well, maybe the best decision is to take off. The second one he took off, I'm like, he may score. A lot of guys go and they want a hook slide. And there's times where you have to understand, if you do have a running quarterback, and we talk about the best ability is availability. You're not lowering your shoulder and taking people on, but we are always looking for quarterbacks that have the ability to run. We're not looking for running backs that can throw. So you're not going to see us 20 times a game we're running the quarterback. There are people that run it offensive styles and are really successful with it, but with this group we have right now, that's not. Now they can hurt you with the feet. Will did it when he was at K-State. Obviously Devin took off a couple times today. Air took off a couple times today. Lincoln's a really, really good athlete. Julian can run, but we're not calling design quarterback runs. You're not going to see, a tremendous amount of respect for Coach Hayes and the legacy that he left here. The straight T is about as far as we go. We are not going single wing. So we are not going to snap it and run quarterback ISO and quarterback power. So, but it's another weapon, and if it also keeps defenses honest. If your defensive end is going to continue to bend and the quarterback pulls and he's on the edge and he's gaining first downs, well, then the defensive end has to stay outside and contain the quarterback. Well, then we can run the ball up and hand the ball off. Sometimes in our running game, our quarterback really is a blocker. He's responsible for a defender. If the defender is cheating and fitting in on the run, well, then his responsibility is to make the defense be honest. And that's really, Air did that a couple times today. And we had a block, the safety was sticking his face in there. So Air took off around the edge. What happens the next play? The defense is wider. Then what do we get to do? We get a chance to hand the ball off to the running back.
Great. Coach, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for being a Buckeye.
All right, thanks. Appreciate it.
Great job.